Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, welcome to the end of month Q&A video for July 2022. Now, two things to say before we get going today. Firstly, I'm just on the edge of losing my voice, so sorry if I sound like Tom Waits by the end of this video. And secondly, it's been a very quiet month on YouTube. July and August typically are because everyone's on their summer holidays doing much more interesting and exciting things than watching guitar videos on YouTube. But I've still got a fair few of your comments to get through today, even though it might be a slightly shorter Q&A video than normal. So let's see who's up first. Mathgis Snellen. Does the MXR Micro Amp solve the problem, or maybe an Ibanez wah? My Ibanez has a buffer and true bypass switch. So this is talking about the old Boss CE1 chorus ensemble. And as many of you will know, that pedal was designed for keyboards, and it has a very low value pot on its preamp. So if you give it a high impedance guitar signal, that pot shelves off all your high end and it sounds really dark. So you can solve that problem in one of two ways. You can either modify the pedal and put a higher value pot on the preamp, but if you don't want to get handy with your soldering iron and butcher your vintage pedal, you can just give it a buffered guitar signal, because that's a lower impedance signal that the pedal wants to see anyway, and that pot leaves your high end alone. Now, pretty much any pedal that's turned on will take a high impedance guitar signal and convert it to a low impedance output. Occasionally tube overdrive pedals can be a bit finicky for that, but generally speaking, any pedal that's on will solve the problem. So if you have your MXR Micro Amp pedal always on, that will work absolutely fine. And also any pedal that's buffered bypass in line before the CE1 will have the same effect. So with your Ibanez wah, if it's in true bypass mode, it won't, or if you flick the buffer switch, it'll drop the impedance down and it will solve the problem. So yes, any pedal that's either an always on pedal or a buffered bypass pedal will work absolutely fine for that trick with the CE1. Ryan Flynn, that Les Paul sounds amazing. I love that you always keep the tone crispy. I hate when the Les Paul goes all muddy and thick. So that Les Paul is just one of my favourite sounding guitars, and it really does sound amazing. But that's the big difference between a vintage spec Les Paul and a modern Les Paul you can go and buy from a shop nowadays, aside from perhaps historic reissues for thousands of pounds. And the big difference between them is the pickups. You know, the other electronics to a slightly lesser extent, and the construction and wood choices and all that. But the big difference is the pickups, because old school PAFs were non-wax potted and they had a much lower DC resistance, and the actual sort of silver humbucker covers were much thinner. Whereas nowadays the humbucker covers are thicker, usually with a layer of copper in, which takes a lot of the high end off. They're wax potted and they have a much higher DC resistance. So the bridge pickup that was in that Les Paul when I bought it, I think was like 14k. Really bloated in the mid-range, really dark, and just no dynamic range. It was flat out all the time. So that's the big difference between old and new in the world of Gibson. Comic book nerd out, love it. Is it correct to put linear for volume and audio for tone? Define correct, really. I mean, in theory, any kind of three-prong potentiometer of the correct sort of values, you can put in any position in any guitar and it will function absolutely fine. It will just feel a bit different under the fingers. Now, it is probably the most common thing to find log taper pots or audio taper pots in electric guitars, more so than linear. Some people genuinely prefer linear, and that's great. Some guitars did use linear as standard, so like old Gretsch's, I think, used linear 1 meg pots in their kind of Durojets and things. And other guitar manufacturers just mixed and matched. So Rickenbacker used to use 250k log pots for the volumes and 500k linear pots for the tones. So it depends whether you just want to have a pot you prefer the feel of, or you're going after a vintage specification, or what. But in theory, you can use any pot in any position. Johnny M. Fantastic vid as usual. Thank you, Johnny. I would probably go for the EHX myself. I prefer to run my modulation pedals pre-gain. I never had a choice back in the day, and it just sounds better to my ear that way. Cheers. Yeah, I tend to prefer my modulations pre-gain too, because as you alluded to there, all the guitar sounds I grew up listening to were a modulation pedal running into the front end of a screaming amp, because it was the days before overdrive pedals were commonplace, and certainly the days before effects loops. So the only way you could use your modulation pedal with gain was to put it into the front end of your amp acting as a gain stage. Now, both kind of work and both sound great. And nowadays I am kind of starting to experiment with modulation post-gain a little bit. But to me, it always sounds a little bit too kind of obvious post-gain. It's a bit obviously affected, whereas if you put your modulation pedal pre-gain, the modulation is then bashed up and compressed and fuzzed up by the gain stage, and it kind of embeds itself in the guitar tone a little bit more. It's a bit more subtle and kind of integral. But both work. I really like phases after fuzz pedals, for example, for that very obvious thing. But yeah, I tend to prefer my modulations pre-gain too. Enrico Palazzo, always good to have you here, Enrico. This time I only listened to the video and not watched it. They are almost identical. I'll probably choose the Analog Man just because it has a depth knob instead of a switch. That's one of the real benefits of the Analog Man mini chorus over the original. The original just had kind of low and high depth, whereas the Analog Man gives you like infinite adjustability on a knob. So that is a real selling point. And in that video, the two sounded so close to each other. You might as well go for the Analog Man because it's available, you can buy it, it's much cheaper than a vintage original, and it has extra functionality, and you can run it on different voltages, so there's lots of benefits to be had by going for the Analog Man over the original EHX small clone. Jordan T. Does it make a difference if one pot reads 550 and one reads 520? It will make a difference, but not a big one at all. And then unless you're kind of A-Bing it, you probably won't even notice the difference. So the higher the number, the brighter that pot will sound in your guitar. So if you've ever taken like a Fender guitar with single coils and given it a 500k pot, it'll be so glassy and quite difficult to listen to. 250k shelves off just enough top end to let vintage single coils kind of sit in their happy place. So with the same principle, a 550k pot will let a little bit of extra top end through over the 520. But as I said, you probably won't notice a difference unless you're doing like a direct recorded comparison. They will sound pretty much exactly the same. But, you know, subtleties are what tone chasing is all about. That's what I always say. Lou Aguado, I like your Riff Salad. Sounded like me when I test gear at guitar stores. While all the kids are playing songs, I'm just making up stuff. My first pedal that wasn't a multi-effects was an MXR Distortion Plus, then a Crybaby Wah, then an Electro Harmonics Electric Mistress Flanger. Well, those are some pretty damn good pedals to start on for sure. Coming up with riffs for videos is one of the hardest things, because you want to use a riff that really shows off whatever piece of gear you're demoing in the right way and lets it kind of speak for itself. But also, if you play any sort of famous riff, you get a copyright strike and your channel gets shut down. So you have to kind of think up riffs that you've kind of written or adapt famous riffs so they're not obviously the copyrighted riff. And with that, there was, I think, 60 patches. So I had to come up with something just to sort of play a chord and then go, what does that sound reminding me of? This, and go for it. So I'm glad I got through that video. But yes, Riff Salad is a very good way of describing it. Derek Spring, I'm surprised at how good the overdrive, setting A6, sounds. An open and coarse crunch like that is something I think most digital modelling struggles with even today. Do all the patches have the same output level, or were we hearing that patch drive the JTM45 a bit harder? Some of the crunch sounds in that pedal were really cool, and the higher gain, super distorted fuzz sounds, they were pretty usable considering it was a very old, kind of 20-year-old digital modelling pedal aimed at beginners back then. The output of the pedal was maxed all the time, but the patches did have kind of varying output levels. But that said, my JTM45 was set really clean with plenty of headroom, so the pedal was at no point driving the tubes in the amp, you were just hearing the sound of the pedal. So yes, some were kind of a little bit kind of high and low compared to others, but at no point was it driving the amp. So the overdrive A6 sound was the overdrive A6 sound. It wasn't a JTM45 being pushed. So yeah, some interesting sounds in that pedal. Doug B, you are a hot guitar player. Oh, I was that day. We were having a massive heat wave in the UK. Small room, doors and windows closed, lights beaming down on me, tube amps kicking out extra heat. I needed guttering by the end of it. It was horrible filming that in here. I am liking the A30 as well. The top end chime has a sweetness to it that isn't matched by blue speakers. So this is the first sort of standalone demo I've done of the 3 new Fane drivers. So the F25 and the F30 standalone demos will be coming. I haven't shot them yet, but they're coming in the next couple of months. And yeah, there's something really nice about the A30. It's an amazing speaker. And I am also probably going to shoot a 4th video with the new drivers, comparing them to their kind of Celestian counterparts. So the A30 compared to the blue, the F25 compared to the G12M greenback, and the F30 compared to the G12H greenback, the heavy magnet one. So I will probably put that video together after I've done the standalone videos. But yeah, the A30 and the blue are a different thing, but they're kind of equivalent, just in a slightly different way. So it's kind of whatever your personal tastes are, really. Jeremiah McCann. Hey Joe, how does this compare to something like a Kingsley Page? So this is the Audio Kitchen Small Trees, and I run this at the start of my pedal board as a kind of always on tube buffer, slight line driver, tone shaper, enhancer thing. The Small Trees is just a clean level boost, so it won't gain up on its own. So it's great for pushing an amp or pushing a signal harder to drive cables, but unless you're putting it into something that's going to clip, you will just get a louder signal. I think it's 16 dB of boost in that pedal. Most of the Kingsleys are overdrive pedals, so they gain up on their own. So the Kingsley Page, for example, you can gain it up and back the output volume down, and it actually creates a distortion on its own. So Kingsley do make, I think one pedal is just a clean boost. I can't remember what it is. Maybe it's some of the Squier preamps. If you're not running it in preamp mode, they're just a clean level as well. I can't remember what the exact model name is. I'll put it on screen now of their kind of clean boost. But in terms of quality, absolutely equivalent. The Audio Kitchen is amazing. So they do slightly different things, but they're both proper high voltage tube-based pedals doing wonderful stuff. So they're absolutely equivalent in terms of quality, even though they're aimed at slightly different applications. JHPRS. Hi Joe, have you ever tried any of the tube preamp pedals from Peace Hill Effects? They look pretty awesome from what I've seen on YouTube. I have come across them, I've never tried one. I believe they're made in Japan, and from what I could tell, they don't have any dealers as such. They kind of sell through Instagram or something like that. I've seen them, and I have inquired about one. I think it was the Tweed Champ or the Tweed Deluxe preamp pedal before. Very expensive, and of course here in the UK I'd have to pay international shipping and import duty and VAT and handling fees and all that. So an expensive pedal becomes a really expensive pedal by the time I import it. I'd love to try one out. They look fantastic, but yeah, I just haven't got my hands on one yet. But I would definitely be up for it. If Peace Hill is watching, or anybody here knows Peace Hill, drop them a line and say I'd love to demo one of their pedals. And finally, I always try and end on a couple of, or one or two sort of slightly punchy comments from throughout the month, and I've got a couple of good ones here. Terry Robertson, PAFs or PAFs, because some people are just too lazy to say PAFs. You know what I mean. When you've made guitar videos for years and you have to say PAF every time you want to refer to a pickup, PAF is so much easier. So it's not lazy, you know what I mean. I think lots of British people say PAFs, lots of American people say PAFs. It all means the same thing at the end of the day, doesn't it? And finally, T. Hansen, you don't seem to appreciate the Danelectro, its unique sound, design and feel. Instead, you continue to insult it. Why did you even buy it? It's apparent it's not the guitar for you. On the contrary, I love my Danelectro, and the mods I did, yes, I bolted the bridge down, and that's not kind of traditional just because it felt a bit flimsy, but the pickup chips, I get so much hate on this video of me modding this Danelectro, it's really weird. But to me, the Curtis Novak lipsticks I put in there, they are vintage correct lipsticks, and to me they sound much more like the classic Danelectro sound than the stock Korean-made electronics did. So for me, I made that guitar more vintage correct, and it sounds right to me now. But so many people just hate me touching a Danelectro. They're fiercely defensive of the thing. But anyway, I do appreciate the Danelectro, T. Hansen. I just kind of made it slightly more to my tastes, which everybody is entitled to do. Anyway, there we go. That's the questions for this month's vote. I told you it was going to be a little bit shorter, and what was it, 13, 14 minutes now? So yeah, slightly shorter video, but I wanted to give you a Q&A, even though YouTube has been a bit quiet. Now, in last month's Q&A, I said I was hoping to unveil something new on the channel in July. That didn't happen because it got delayed for various very boring reasons, but that's going to happen next month. And I was hoping to have something new to unveil in July and something new in August. So both of those things are going to come in August now. And also there's going to be another video in August of a look at a brand new pedal that a few people know about but nobody's heard yet. So I've got it here, I've tried it out, it's amazing, and I'm going to kind of show that to you so at some point in August. I'm not sure exactly when, I need to figure that out with the manufacturer, but it's going to be like a new look at a brand new pedal on the market based on a circuit that is kind of held in high regard but not many people are either aware of or have sort of delved down in terms of cloning. So going to be a very interesting one. So that's 3 brand new things coming in August. So I'm looking forward to shooting all those videos. But anyway, the first new thing is coming on the 5th, and I can't wait for you guys to see it because I've been sitting on it for a few months, really wanting to show it to you, but I've been doing some mods and I wanted to get it all complete before I show it to you guys. But can't wait to get that video out. It's a lot of fun. So thank you ever so much for watching, folks. Any more comments and questions, drop them underneath and I will do my best to answer them in the comments and in next month's Q&A if they're sort of very interesting and relevant to a good amount of people. So have a good month, folks, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.